Hello and welcome to our Trustees Week webinar. We're excited to launch our brand new Good Governance Checkup. My name is Tracy Bird and I run the SCVO Information Service. And thanks to you all for joining us today. Just to note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available later on the SCVO website. I'm delighted to have Heather Lamont, who is Client Investment Director of CCLA, with us today, as well as my colleague, Beth McCushy, who has helped develop the checkup, Andrew Burns, SCVO's Chair of Trustees, and Rona Davidson of Aberdeenshire Voluntary Action. Thanks to you all for being here. So Trustees Week is all about celebrating the work of trustees and the role they play in governing our organisations. With the generous support of CCLA, SCVO have developed a new online good governance checkup, which we think will be vital for trustees of all types of voluntary organisation. It can be used to help boards review their governance in line with the 5 key principles of the Scottish Governance Code and identify areas for improvement. But before we show you this checkup, I thought it might be useful for me to quickly run through the background to the code and its 5 principles. So if you just bear with me. Okay, can you all see that? Great. Okay, so the Scottish Governance Code was launched in November 2018, and we say it was created by the sector for the sector. We received funding from Scottish Government for a working group of Scotland's Third Sector Governance Forum to come together, look at what principles we wanted to include, and then that was put out for consultation. If anyone's interested, members of the Governance Forum include SCVO, ACOSVO, OSCAR, there's some TSIs on there, charity lawyers, and some third sector consultants as well. We feel the code is a statement of best practice and should be accessible and applicable to all. So it's designed for charities and non-charities, social enterprises, and organisations big and small. It's not a legal or regulatory requirement, so if you're a charity, you don't have to report on an OSCAR or anything like that. But instead, we hope it's aspirational and will help organisations continuously improve their governance. It has 5 core principles, and they're all equally important. And the first one is organisational purpose. So that's really about trustees understanding and committing to their purpose, and it really emphasises the importance of your governing document as well, adhering to that in your decision making, because that's really your rule book for how you run your organisation. The second principle, leadership, that's all about understanding as a trustee your individual and your collective roles and responsibilities, and setting the tone through your leadership. And also importantly, particularly if you've got staff, respecting the difference between governance and operations. And that's sometimes where organisations do fall down. The next principle, board behaviour, is about trustees being transparent and open in their governance and listening to stakeholders, and also recognising and dealing with conflicts of interest and just conflicts in general on a board, which sometimes you do get because they're all passionate people on boards. The fourth principle, control, really looks at policies and procedures, the importance of risk management, your legal structure, and financial management. And then finally, effectiveness. That's really brings everything together, and it's about regularly reviewing your performance and the skills mix on your board, and developing your board continually, and also thinking about succession planning. So that's the 5 principles. Once the code was launched, SCVO thought it would be good to have a checkup that trustees can use in line with the code as a way to really evidence and demonstrate good governance in an organisation. So we initially developed a paper copy. It was available on our website. But now we've developed the digital code, and Beth's going to tell you more about that later. But hopefully It's a much improved product. It will give you access to resources. It will allow you to share and compare your results with other trustees. So we're really excited about it. And that's from me as regards the governance code. That was a whistle-stop tour, really. I'm going to hand over to Heather now, because I just wanted her to say a few words about why they've chosen to support the Good Governance Checkup. And Heather, over to you. Thanks.
Great. Well, thanks, Tracy. And yeah, we're really pleased at CCLA to be supporting Trustees Week. So well done to everyone at the Governance Forum and all the events you're running this week. And this session on the Good Governance Checklist is particularly close to our hearts, because what we at CCLA do for our clients, we call it good investment. And if you wonder what that looks like, well, it looks a bit like good governance. So whether we're talking about investment or governance, yes, you need to produce strong, measurable results, but it's not just about numbers, it's about doing things the right way. And we want to do things the right way, partly because it's just about doing the right thing. And I know a lot of our clients find that really reassuring, and they know that CCLA's culture is well aligned with their own. But the other reason for wanting to do things the right way is that we know it will make you more resilient and more effective. So if we think about resilience in the investment context, we don't just look at the numbers of a company that we might invest in, its profits and losses and balance sheet and things like that. We also look about how it is run, how it goes about doing its business. We think about its standards in terms of environmental behaviour, its social practices and supply chain, its own governance structures. Yes, partly because we know our clients want us to invest in better companies rather than worse behaved ones, but also because we know the companies that do have these strong governance features actually perform better in the investment returns that they produce for our clients' portfolios. And I guess the same is true in charity governance. If we think about resilience, well, goodness knows, COVID certainly produced a test of resilience, and it's not rocket science to realise that charities with good governance standards, with the strong sense of organisational purpose, with the very clear awareness of the need for leadership and good board behaviour and strong controls over what they were doing, would all help to see you through the COVID crisis and adapt as necessary. I haven't mentioned effectiveness yet. That's indeed one of the 5 pillars, a very important one, and I actually see all the other 5 as contributing to effectiveness. That we don't just do those things for their own sake, they actually contribute to the effectiveness of the organisation. And we see this if we think about something like board diversity, which is of course the topic of several sessions this week and a very important topic. Well, you'll know that makes good board diversity makes your charity more effective. And we know the same is true when we think of my investment world of companies. We know that companies with better diversified boards behave better and perform better than companies with poor diversification. So that's one of the things that we engage with companies on and try to improve standards of behavior. And thinking again about effectiveness, we also use that power of our clients' investment ownership to engage with companies and indeed with policymakers to try and bring about other sorts of positive change. Climate change, we've been very active in that since long before anyone had heard of COP26. Modern slavery, things like mental health at work. These are all big issues that our clients care about, and we can be more effective, not just in managing the portfolios, but about bringing about real world change, positive change in these areas by harnessing that power of asset ownership. So good governance resonates really well with us here at CCLA, and I'm just looking forward to learning more about the digital Good Governance Checkup.
Thanks, Heather, and we do really appreciate your support. So I encourage you to post your questions in the question and answer facility as we go, because we will have time at the end to look at these. And I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Beth, who is Head of Support Services at SCVO and is also a trustee herself. Thanks, Beth.
Great, thank you very much, Tracy, and thanks again, Heather. I'm delighted to be with you all this morning, and or this afternoon actually, we're into the afternoon, aren't we, and to have the chance to share our digital checkup. I should say, although I'm here presenting it, this is Tracy's hard work, and she deserves a real round of applause if it was possible to do that on a webinar, along with the web services team at SCVO who've done the back end technical development. But it's been a labour of love for Tracy and quite involved, so we'll get into some of that as we run through it. But before I sort of start to demo anything, I was keen just to give people the opportunity, if it's okay, to use the chat function and just pop in, if you could, for me, why you're here today, why you think your organisation might benefit from using a checkup or assessment tool around governance. So if you would humour me and just pop something in the chat about, you know, what's the thing that appeals to you most about this, why have you come along this morning, that would be great. And while those start to come through, I am going to share my screen.
And I would just say, if people are raising their hand, we can't really see them. So we would, if you've got something to contribute, just please put it in the chat or the Q&A.
Okay. So I'm going to pop my slides up as well and bring the chat over to the other screen. Now, I know there are over 40 of you on the call, and I'm not seeing much coming through yet. So I'll just kick off, and then we can hopefully see some things in the chat as we go. Are you seeing the presenter view there, Tracy? Or are you seeing the other view?
I'm seeing the presenter view there, yeah.
Let me see if I can swap this around.
And somebody's asking if the chat, the Q&A facility is working. And yes, I am seeing your questions there. So do put them in. We'll get to them at the end.
Okay, sorry guys. I'm going to stop this here and just try this again. Apologies. We did test this beforehand. You wouldn't think that I used to work in the digital team, would you? Right, let's try again. Okay, are you seeing just the main slideshow now?
Yes, that's great. Yes.
Fantastic. Great. Okay, apologies everybody. There we go. So thinking about, you know, why might we use an assessment tool like this? So hopefully there's stuff coming through in the chat, but I've popped a few ideas up myself as well. So as Tracy mentioned at the start, there's something here for us about knowing what does good actually look like. And the governance forum with the Scottish Governance Code has been around for quite a while. So we have got that kind of recognised sense of what does it mean to do good governance. There's something about, for individual organisations, being able to find out where you're doing really well just now, but also areas where you might want to improve. And then there's something about being able to benchmark. So just to pop into those in a wee bit more detail. Knowing what good looks like. So governance is a big topic. There are some people who are real experts in all the fine detail of it, some of the legal side of it. And there is sort of issues around compliance and regulatory stuff, but there's also best practice around governance and some of the softer skills. So as was just mentioned, you know, the diversity, the inclusion, how you make decisions collectively. And we know that the sector is diverse, so there will be organisations joining us today that are probably really small and grassroots, maybe don't have any paid employees, and there will be organisations that are much bigger and, you know, national or even have an international focus. And because of that, it can feel pretty daunting when you're thinking about how you want to develop and improve your governance. So what the code did, and what our checkup now enables even more so, we're hoping, is a recognised, as Tracy said at the start, kind of standard. No matter what size you are, no matter what type of voluntary organisation you are, this is what it means to be good at governance. So it takes that hard work away from individual organisations. And the reason for organisations we might want to know a bit about what we do well or what we do not so well is obviously to celebrate success, which is something that we often forget about or miss, but also to be able to prioritise those areas where we want to develop and improve. And one reason that we're hoping that this digital tool will be really useful for people is you might have a board where there's a bit of disagreement around how you might focus your action or where your priorities need to be. So by having this kind of objective set of criteria that says this is what it means to be good and these are the things that are most important, you can maybe influence internally. So if you are in a position where you feel you want your board to develop in a particular way and maybe you're struggling to get your kind of colleagues on board, then this can be something that can help with that internal influence piece. And then finally, getting guidance and support. So it's all very well knowing how we measure up, but actually what organisations often come to our service and also to the TSIs and other support bodies for is help with improving and developing. And we will hopefully be able to show you how our tool can assist with that too. And then the final piece, that kind of benchmarking comparison piece. So for individual organisations, you might want multiple members of the board to take this tool and then compare the results and see whether you have the same perspective. It's a self-assessment, so people might come out with slightly different scores, and often the most valuable discussion is in why people have different opinions around things. You could, if you wanted to, compare your results with other similar organisations. We as SCVO won't share your results with anybody, but if you wanted to do that, maybe you're part of an action learning set, or maybe you've got other kind of buddying processes, then you can share your results. And then for us as an organisation at SCVO, and for the wider kind of governance forum, it's going to let us build up a picture of actually where does the sector sit around governance, and that's information that we don't have just now. So although the code's been around since 2018, as Tracy said, we don't actually know. We know anecdotally, but we don't know comprehensively who's using it, how are they using it, how are organisations managing their governance. So it will give us a lot of back-end data that will be anonymised, but we'll begin to be able to analyse and get a picture across the sector. And as a result of that, obviously develop the support that we offer. So I'll take you into the tool itself. I've chickened out, unfortunately, so I should be doing this as a live demo probably, and it does all work perfectly. I've been through it a few times this morning, but I decided to screen grab just to make sure that I can show you exactly the pieces of information that we're keen to demonstrate. But I will say that this is the URL. So Joanne, if you'd be okay to chuck that into the chat box for people, please, that'd be great. So you can, if you've got double screens, you can pop this into your browser and have a look at it in real time while I'm chatting you through this morning. But basically, if you've used our digital checkup, you should find this kind of familiar. You'll come to a landing page, pretty clean and simple. It'll tell you a little bit about it, and then you'll be asked to sign in. So you'll be asked to, if you don't already, to set up an SCVO account. This is functionality that we've had on our website for about the last 6 months or so. We kind of introduced it at the start of the financial year. Excuse me, and your SCVO account can be used across multiple SCVO websites. So if you've got a Funding Scotland login, for example, the same one will work for this governance tool. And the reason that we're asking you to sign in is that one of the big learnings we've had from our other checkup tools is that we allowed access to them for any organisation. I mean, this is free, I should say, so it doesn't cost anything, you just need to sign in. But it's really helpful for us to be able to tie a little bit of the information back to an organisation in terms of how we might do analysis in the future, but also to enable us to kind of target support, because we're going to develop our support offering around governance as well. So you'll be asked to give your name, your email address and a password. You'll then be asked all automatically to link yourself to an organisation. So if I filled this in on behalf of SCVO, it would automatically find that I worked for SCVO because my email address has SCVO in it. If I did this for Paths for All, which is where I'm a trustee, I would use my Gmail address and then I could link myself to Paths for All. I could choose that as an organisation to link to. Once you've linked yourself to your organisation, you'll then kind of, the whole checkup will open up for you. So the first thing is, we'll ask you to fill in a little bit of information. This is for two purposes. So the information about whether you're a charity or not, what your legal structure is, whether you have staff or not, that'll actually be used to filter the questions that you see when you complete the checkup. So there's quite a complicated algorithm sits in the back behind it. So that information is really important to make sure you see questions and criteria that are applicable to your type of organisation. But it will also help us with some of that analysis. So as I said, it'll all be done in an anonymous way. It was easy for me to say. But it'll let us over time see, I mean, we've no idea what the trends might be, but it might be the case that smaller organisations do really, really well at the, I don't know, the organisation and purpose bit, but struggle with the leadership bit, for example. That's just an example, obviously. But it'll let us begin to look at some of those trends. And we've been able to do that with our digital checkup, which has been running for 3 or 4 years now, and get a really good sense of kind of where the sector's at and which types of organisations may need different types of support. So you'll fill that in, then you'll get into the meat of the kind of checkup proper. So each of the principles has a series of statements, and these have been taken directly from the Scottish Governance Code. We've tried to stay as true to it as we possibly can. It does mean they're quite long, so this completing this is a slightly more involved process than maybe some digital tools might be. We estimate it could take you 20 minutes to half an hour to go through it fully. So it's worth, grabbing a cup of tea and really taking the time to work through it in a kind of organised and thoughtful way. I think it's really worth the effort. The information you'll get out the other side is incredibly valuable, but it's not a quick thing. This isn't a answer 5 questions and go away with a big red tick and think you're amazing. It's really a quite intentional process to really delve into the details of how your organisation is governed. So the principle is set out there. So this is kind of 101 really, isn't it, of governance? This one is about understanding our purpose, our values, and committing to them to make sure that our organisation delivers what it's set up to do. And then what Tracy has done is to turn that kind of overarching statement into a couple of sort of clear criteria where you can give an answer to demonstrate that you are, measuring up to and achieving that kind of principle. So the statements for this one are: all of our trustees are clear about our purpose, all of our activities are consistent with our purpose and needs of the beneficiaries. So hopefully you'd be able to answer yes to both of those. If you thought we'd do that a little bit, but we could be better at it, you might be answering partially, and then you also have the option of no or don't know. I think on this particular example, if you were saying no or don't know, would have some serious worries about the direction of the organisation. So hopefully for some of them, the majority of our organisations are coming in with a yes. Here's another example. So this one's about how you handle concerns and complaints. And again, the criteria that you're asked to think about are: do you have a complaints process? Does the board receive a regular report on the complaints received? And there's one that if you were engaging in fundraising, do you achieve what you're required to for the code of fundraising practice? And you've got, as you can see here, an example for not applicable on the fundraising one, because it might not be relevant to all organisations. So you work your way through. As I said, it's quite an involved process. We think it could take 20 minutes to half an hour. You might not want to do it all in one sitting, or the doorbell might go, or all of these various other things that might come and interrupt. Or you might need to go off and get some more information. If you're a large organisation where there's a good delegation, you might not know about the fundraising code of practice, for example. You might want to go and speak to the operational staff to get the right answer. So you can save your process at any point. You just pop down to the bottom of the page and click on the Save Progress button, and you'll get a wee pop-up that gives you the option of a recovery link. So you can copy that URL or just pop your email address in and we'll send you an email, and you can open it up again at any point and continue. And once you've done all of the different principles and all of the criteria, you'll get to the end and you'll get a nice personalised action plan. So it will look like this. Hopefully it will show that you're doing pretty well in a lot of the areas. So in this fictional example where I completed it, I said yes to 92% of the effectiveness questions, for example. We'll send you an email to this. So if you click away by mistake or whatever, you can come back anytime. I think we'll keep them for 3 years, so you can come back anytime and access the results, and you can share that email with other members of the board or anybody else that you want to. But you'll obviously be aware that there might be some sensitive information in there. So as I said, SCVO will never share this with anybody, but it's yours to do with what you want to once you've got it. You'll then get to see what we're calling your action plan. So depending on how you answer the questions, this will be longer or shorter. But what we've tried to do, and this is the bit where the back end gubbins all comes into play, is we've weighted the questions by how critical they are. So things that are sort of mission critical things like making sure you file your annual returns on time, for example, they'll show up as urgent actions. And particularly if it's a really important one and you've answered no to it, they'll show up as urgent actions. And you can see here the sorts of results that you'll see. So you get given the statement. So the top one here was about understanding and being familiar with the Scottish Governance Code. You can see what you answered. So I answered no to that one. You get a little bit of blurb about why this matters and why it's so important. And then you get a link that'll take you out to an external source of support. So that could be a page of web content. It might be a referral into your TSI for support. There's various different pieces of content there. We've tried to, as much as possible, have them really relevant to Scottish voluntary organisations, but we'll be continuing to develop and enhance the resources that are available for support as well over time. So you'll see your urgent actions at the top of the page. You'll then also, depending on what other answers you've given, see important actions and other actions. So broadly speaking, the important actions are ones that are still really quite critical to really good governance, but you've maybe answered partially around, and the other actions tend to be ones that would fall more into the best practice realm, which is not to say they're not very important, but if you were prioritising what you wanted to do, you would start off with the urgent and important ones probably. And there's just a couple of other examples there. So there's one about understanding your duties and responsibilities that would take you off to Oscar. And there's one about doing a regular review of your governing document and constitution. And that's something that we know organisations often don't think about until it's kind of crisis point and they suddenly have to make a change. So that's how it will look. Some of the feedback we had from our initial user testing was that action plan can be a bit overwhelming. So again, it'll depend how you answer, but if you did find yourself in the position where you were having to answer partially or no to a lot of them, you could end up with a really, really long list here. So we've introduced these filters that you can see at the top that will allow you to filter by the 5 key principles. And again, Andrew, I think, is going to talk about this in a wee second. But you might decide one possible approach for a board to take would be to say, we can't do all of this at once. So what we're going to do is take one principle at a time, make sure we've ticked off anything that's absolutely urgent that's causing us a compliance or a regulatory problem, and then we're going to work through what the best actions might be according to each of the principles. So if you did want to take that approach, you can filter your results and you can see it that way. And the web team have done some nice whizzy technical stuff that means if you didn't want to share the link and you wanted to have this as a PDF document, if you just hit Control and P, you'll get it'll create a nice kind of style sheet behind the scenes, and it will give you a nice version of this as a PDF that you can print out if you're still a paper person. This is the email that you'll get. So once you've finished it, it'll say, thanks very much. Here's a link. As I said, you can go back to that for 3 years. So go back as often as you want to. If we update the resources, then that will update in the results that you see. And it gives you some suggestions for how you might want to use this and take it forward. And then finally, we're launching this as a beta. That means that we have poured our thoughts and our insights and all of our learnings into it. We've done user testing, but as with any digital tool, once you release it out into the wild, people use it in ways you hadn't expected. People have bits of feedback that you hadn't thought of that would make it much better. So we'd love to hear from you once you start using it about how useful it is. And no comment is a bad comment. If you've got good comments, it's always nice to hear them, but we will be picking this up and looking at it on a regular basis. So on every page at the bottom left-hand side, you'll be able to click feedback, and then you can leave us a comment, a suggestion. If there are any technical problems, you can tell us about a bug. And that's a quick run through. So what I was hoping I could ask you all to do is to jump back into the chat box for me. And I can see there's chat and questions have come up there, so we'll pick them up in a second. But just give us your first impressions. I'd love to know if either you're kind of a bit of a sad face, this wasn't what I was expecting, maybe this doesn't feel like it's quite right for me, through to a 5, which is get me off the webinar, I want to start it right now. So I'm hoping that lots of you are in the 5 camp, but it'd be really good to know if you're not. And so, yeah, if you can give us your first impressions, that would be great. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Beth. We've got 4s and 5s coming in, so it's looking good.
Good stuff.
There's a couple of questions, Beth, just about getting trustees to compare, which I think is the value of this as well. So somebody's asking, if more than one trustee completes the checklist, do they all get individual plans, or can they be collated across the organisation? And I don't think we can do that at the moment with the latter, can we?
We can't do that technically just now, but it could be something we could develop in the future if that was something that people felt was a need. So on our digital checkup, you are able to do that. You'd be able to get multiple people from an organisation to fill it in. It's slightly more complicated with this one just because the algorithm that sits behind it is more complicated because we weighted the results by urgent actions and so on. But that's the kind of feedback we'd love to hear. If actually that would be useful for people, then we can certainly consider it. But right now, each trustee would get their own results, and you'd need to put them side by side and say, oh, why did you think our leadership wasn't as good as you thought it was, or what have you.
Yeah, great. As I say, lots of 4s and 5s. There's a 2 to 3 because somebody thinks they're not sure the trustees will see the benefit of this. So I think that's more about having that kind of conversation at board level to encourage people. You should be looking at your governance regularly as a board, self-examining. It's almost like not an appraisal, that seems too formal, but I think it is a good thing if you can get your trustees to think about their governance and how good this is. And then Rona's just put in the chat, when we were talking about comparisons, it could be undertaken as a group activity, you know, if everybody brings their results together and have a review session. So with that, Rona, thank you for putting that in. I'm just going to hand over to you. You are someone who helps local organisations and trustees on a daily basis with their governance, and I'm sure you've got some tales to tell. What did you think of the checkup and how it will help trustees and boards?
Afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. Apologies for the voice. As I explained to everybody in the panel, I've got a touch of a cold, so my voice is coming in and out. Regarding to where we sit, I work for Aberdeenshire Voluntary Action, or AVA for short, and we are one of the 32 TSIs within the whole of Scotland, and I cover governance as my specialism within the Aberdeenshire area. So the groups we work with are quite diverse, as Tracy has explained already, from small community groups, maybe re-establishing, especially just now, to much larger organisations, non-for-profit. Using the trial system for the checkup itself, I really liked it, because we're all moving towards, whether we think it's a good or not, maybe it's a good idea, of being more digitally active. I liked the pragmatic approach that you went through step by step. And at the end, there was a visual summary of where you were currently on your thoughts. It could identify where the gaps potentially are with your organisation, but it also gives you the links to where either the information is available through SCVO to find out where you can improve, or links to maybe linking to us as TSIs, because we are here to do just that. We're the third sector interface to support the wider third sector, and to promote and support organisations going through evaluations such as governance. And we want to try and promote the good practice behind it. So regardless if you are part of a small group, working in a small community hall in the back of beyond in Aberdeenshire, as I do, or whether you're a much larger organisation with a really vibrant and passionate trustees board who are quite clear and are finding that going through the process, their markings are much higher at the high end of the scoring system, I would just question that. I would like you to see, going through the approach, the gaps that need to be improved, and come back to us as TSIs. We can help with anything governance-wise, from constitutional matters right through to the actual approach of educating you guys involved, because without trustees, organisations wouldn't operate, wouldn't have a third sector. And the roles and responsibilities of trustees sometimes can be forgotten. And I like the way that, as I say, it was a process that was quite clear. I like the idea of maybe the collective boards coming together, because it should be a democratic process. And yes, everybody's going to have their own individual ideas and slants of where they think the organisation sits. But if you can collaborate together in an effective manner, it allows you to then plan for the future. I'm sure we're all dealing with business plans and future planning, especially just now with COP26 and elements there, discussions are ongoing. But at least the results are there that you can then go back to and review once more. So I liked it. I liked it for that approach. I like things to be practical and make sense. The questions are quite clear. If you're clicking or ticking the boxes to say partially or not so, that's not a bad thing. Let's turn a negative to positive, because at least it identifies where that gaps are and how they can be improved. I like the visualization at the end. Again, very clear. You can break it down regarding to the 5 elements, and you can then prioritize as you see fit. Don't forget, there's 32 of us across the whole of Scotland. I'm going to promote Aberdeenshire because that's where I work. But governance is such a wide faculty and sector, should I say, that use the value and the skills within your local TSI, and the services are free. We're here to support you guys, and without the third sector, groups wouldn't operate. So does that help? And I would really like to, I like the questions coming in, I really would like to get involved within the governance more historically within Scotland in the future, because I'm part of the forum and I see the differences across the areas. But I think Aberdeenshire, we're doing quite well, and let's get the increase in the focus of where we're hoping to head to in the future. So that's my input. Hope it helps.
Thanks, Rona. That was some really nice things you said there. I wondered if also, Rona, if you could just put in the chat, if anybody doesn't know how to find their local TSI, where they would find it, and then everybody can know. Okay, Andrew, over to you. We've been working together this year on the checkup with the board, and obviously this is different. It's digital, it has its advantages. So what do you think is going to be good about it?
Well, thanks, Tracy, and good afternoon, everybody. Tracy, if it's okay, what I think I'll do is maybe just spend a few minutes talking about the sort of historical, in a way, as it is now, paper version of the Good Governance Checkup. As you said, the SCVO board's been going through that. But also, along with Rona and others, I was one of the sort of guinea pigs that trialled the online version just over the last few weeks. So I thought I'd also just say a few words about my experience of that. So I've actually gone through pretty much in totality, both the paper version and the online version now. And if it's okay, I'll just say a few words, as I say, about each of my sort of experiences with those. So just starting with the paper version, I think you mentioned right at the start, Tracy, back in 2018, the governance code was launched, and SCVO were obviously one of the key players, along with Acosvo and others, as you mentioned, that led to the launch of the Good Governance Code. As current convener or chair of SCVO, I thought it would be a good idea if we tried to lead by example. So I thought, along with my board colleagues, it might be helpful if we actually did this sort of paper-based checkup of the Good Governance Code as an SCVO board. And as I say, as the national representative body, we should be leading by example. So that's what we try to do. And with your help, Tracy, we've taken each of the 5 core principles over about a year and a half, 2 years now. I think we started this when we were actually all meeting in real life, and it sort of slipped obviously into the pandemic. And now we are back again as a board meeting in sort of hybrid fashion. So we've gone right through the whole spectrum. But I think, Beth, you mentioned it in your presentation, we concluded that it was too much to do all in one go as a main board. Maybe an individual trustee could do it in one go in paper format, but as a main board, we thought it was too much to take all 5 of the core principles. So you helpfully, Tracy, have been coming along, I think now to 4 board meetings, maybe 4 out of the last 5. And we've just taken each of the core principles in turn. So organisational purpose, leadership, board behaviour, control and effectiveness. I think we haven't done effectiveness yet. We've still to do that at our December board meeting coming up next month now. But we have taken each of the other 4 one by one. We've gone through the checkup list, and collectively as a board of 11 trustees, we've had a discussion. We've individually filled in the paper checkup lists beforehand, or some of us have, some didn't, but we collated, I think Tracy, you collated those, and then we had a sort of collective discussion, as I've said, on 4 occasions now about each of the core principles, and we've still got 1 more to do. And then at the end of that process, so after the December board meeting, when we've done effectiveness, we'll have a really good reflective response to how we feel when managing each of those core principles as an organisation. And we've built up a set of actions based on each of our 4 discussions, soon to be 5 discussions. So that's the sort of experience we've had as a board doing it in paper format. I've really found it extremely worthwhile. I mean, I can't speak on behalf of every single one of the other 10 trustees, but I think they have all also found it pretty worthwhile. I mean, to a greater and lesser extent, obviously. I think as some people have said in the chat box, some trustees are really interested in governance, others just aren't. And that's just how human beings are. There's going to be a variety of views about this. But on the main, I think it's been a really worthwhile exercise. And the vast majority of the 11 trustees, myself included, have found it really valuable to sort of develop an action plan based on what we're doing well, but most importantly, what we're not doing well and what we don't know about enough of. So that's been really helpful for us. So moving on, Tracy, just briefly to so that was the paper format, moving on to the online checkup, which you're launching today. And as I said, along with Rona and others, I was one of the sort of guinea pigs who trialled it. And I think, so I filled this in as an individual person, not on behalf of a whole board per se. And I found it really, really helpful. I mean, as I've said, I thoroughly enjoyed going through the paper format and getting the checkup lists for each of the 5 core principles, and getting the feedback and coming up with action points. That's all been really helpful. But I found the online version better. I have to say that I really do genuinely think it's been better. It's been easier to go through the process really in some ways. I can see from some of the questions before I started speaking that and I think Beth, you responded to this, it might be worth thinking about being able to collate individual trustees' responses into a collective for an organisation, because I think that would potentially add some power to the online tool. But it took me about 25 minutes to fill in the 5 sections. And what I really, really liked about it was, the question, as you've showed in your presentation, Bethany, it's fairly intuitive to go through it. But what I really, really liked about it was the action plan that you get back. You're pretty much instantaneously, once you've finished the 5 core principles, you instantaneously get an email popping into your inbox with an action plan that, as you've outlined in the presentation, Beth, and I think you mentioned it as well, Tracy, you've got urgent, important, and other actions. And that's just completely invaluable to me to have that. I thought, to have that instantaneous feedback, particularly around urgent actions that are required based on going through each of the 5 core principles. And when I filled it in, I think I got 3 urgent actions back, and I have to say, one of them I just did not expect at all. So it was a really salutary lesson that you might think, you're doing all the right things around the core principles of good governance, but sometimes you're not. And bad practice and habits just creep in, don't they, to boards, no matter how well or badly they might be chaired. Things just get rusty at times, and it's never wrong to be reminded about what you should be doing according to the Good Governance Code. And like I say, Tracy, I thought getting the instantaneous action plan back and having it broken down by urgent, important, and other actions. And I didn't know this until you presented, Beth, that it's available for 3 years. I think that's really all very, very positive. And whilst I thoroughly enjoyed doing the paper version, I'm looking forward to doing the effectiveness core principle at our December board meeting. I've found the online version even more valuable, and I would highly recommend to everybody on the call, as I'm sure you're already doing as we're all talking, to have a look at the online checkup and to consider taking it forward for your organisation. So I hope those reflections are helpful, Tracy, and I'm very happy to have a go at helping with any of the questions that are popping up in the chat box. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, do put your questions in the Q&A box. And I think, yeah, we've had some great discussions with the SCVO board. Sometimes they've spiraled off in all kinds of different directions. But I would also say we don't expect anyone to get, 100% in each of the areas, because boards evolve, organizations evolve. So yeah, don't be too hard on yourself on that respect. There is one comment in the Q&A box, and somebody's saying they really find it hard to get people involved in questions to do with governance, because they just want to get on with doing the work. And yeah, I get that. I think, but it's quite good to have something like this checkup as a way to start perhaps difficult conversations. You might have strong personalities on a board, or trustees maybe not turning up to meetings that they should be. So if you've got something like this, you can point to that and say, well, this is good governance and this is where we're falling short. So nobody likes having difficult conversations, but this can help with that, I think. So does anybody else have any questions about the checkup? We've got some, I'm just looking at the chat here.
There were a couple in the chat that I noticed, Tracy, that were just kind of more technical things, but I can pick them up if that's useful. One was, does every trustee need their own individual account? And the answer to that is yes, you would. So as it's set up just now, unless you were to do it in real time, where you were in a meeting and had it up on a screen and you all sat round, yes, you would need to each create your own account and associate that with the organisation. And another question was, can an email address be attached to multiple organisations? And the answer to that is no. So the way that we make that connection behind the scenes in the SCVO database is to link an individual to an organisation, and the email address is part of the way that we do that. So if you were a trustee of multiple organisations, I will take that away and work out how we might be able to enable that technically, because I can see you might have a Gmail address and be a trustee on several different boards. So we'll have a think about that. But currently the SCVO account associates an email address to an organisation. I guess you could fill it in twice though. I mean, that's worth saying. You fill it in, you get the link, you can go back to that link as many times as you want. You could fill it in a second time and get a different link and go back to that second link. So you can do it multiple times. So you might do it that way, would be a way to get around it, but I'll have a think about how we might improve the account. And the other thing that I didn't mention that's maybe worth saying is you'll get an option when you sign in to say, would you like to be reminded to do this again in a year's time? And again, that would be an automated thing. But if you kind of thought, I'm going to do it now, we're going to take it away and work on it, and then in a year I want to see how we measure up, you can get, it's just an automated email, but it would come out to you in a year to say, you know, you did this a year ago, would you like to do it again and see how you've progressed? So if you tick that box, that's what you will receive.
Thanks, Beth. We just have a comment in the Q&A, somebody saying, you know, how do you know you're doing the work if you don't review it? So yeah, I agree with that. But there aren't any more technical questions, I don't think, coming in, other than the comments. And we will take all these comments back because, as Beth said, this is just the first version of the checkup, and we really want to hear your feedback on it so we can improve on that. If there's no more questions, then I would just say thanks to you all for attending today. And I hope you have been inspired to look at your own governance and try the checkout out, because we do want to get your feedback on this. Before I go, I would just like to highlight an offer that SCVO have launched for Trustees Week. I'm just going to put up a slide to give you more details on that. It's from Good Moves, and what Good Moves is offering for the months of November and December is that you can advertise your trustees' vacancies, so if you've got any slots on your board, for free. And what this will give you is a reach to over 80,000 people who are looking for roles in the voluntary sector. They're obviously mainly looking for job roles, but you know, trustee roles as well. So if you want to take advantage of that offer, the telephone number is there and the email, but we will send out more details about this in the email following the webinar. So I hope you've enjoyed the presentation, and I hope you will use the checkup. As I said, today's session is part of a week-long programme of events to celebrate Trustees Week, and we've got another webinar tomorrow, and that's going to look at lived experience on boards. And then on Thursday, we're hosting a discussion on what trustees can do to increase diversity on their boards from the inside, as it were, and a webinar looking at digital tools and how they can help make your board more inclusive. And you can find details of all these events on the SCVO website, and I hope you'll be able to join us at some of them. Thanks to everybody, Andrew, Rona, Heather and Beth, for joining me today. Really appreciate that. And remember, if you're an existing trustee, then do join our SCVO trustee network, details of which will go up on the slide. Thanks again, enjoy Trustees Week, and goodbye.